"May I have your leftovers, sir?" But when the lonely rancher looked into her eyes, he found a miracle he never knew he needed. Bear Ridge, Wyoming territory, summer, 1885. The sun bore down like a branding iron, turning the main street of Bear Ridge into a shimmering path of dust and heat. Horses snorted in the shade, their tails twitching lazily. The saloon doors creaked, opening and closing with every booted step. Inside, men laughed, cards slapped against wood, and whiskey burned down dry throats. It smelled of tobacco, sweat, and yesterday's sweat again. Eli Ward sat in the farthest corner of the saloon, half in shadow, his plate nearly clean. He was broad-shouldered, with graying stubble and the kind of stillness that made people give him space. He ate slowly, deliberately, as if the act itself was a chore rather than a pleasure. No one sat near him. No one ever did. Then the door opened again. Heads turned, not for a man with a gun or a drunken ranch hand, but for a girl. A girl no older than 18, in a torn brown dress that had once been yellow, barefoot, her hair tangled, and her cheeks hollow. Her lips were cracked. Her eyes, though tired, were not broken. She stepped just past the threshold. Dust clung to her ankles like chains. Her hands trembled as she scanned the room, as if she might turn and run. But instead, she stepped forward, just 3 paces, enough to speak. Her voice was a brittle whisper, carried only because the room, sensing something strange, had gone half quiet. "May I have your leftovers, sir?" It was Eli she had spoken to. The room paused. Eli looked up from his plate. He did not move quickly, nor with surprise. He simply raised his eyes to meet hers. They were pale and sharp, like the sky before a storm. He did not blink. "You got anyone?" he asked, low and measured. The girl swallowed. Her voice cracked again. "I'm just hungry, sir." A scoff broke the silence. The saloon's owner, a stout woman with a mean glint in her eye, wiped a glass with a dirty cloth and muttered loud enough for all to hear, "Food's for payin' folk, not stray mongrels." A few men laughed. One spat tobacco juice near the girl's feet. She did not move. Her hands clenched at her sides, her chin lifting half an inch. Pride wrestled hunger in her eyes, and hunger was winning. Eli said nothing. He stared at her for one more breath, then another. Then he pushed the plate toward the center of the table, still with half a biscuit and a strip of bacon left on it. Slowly he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a silver coin, and set it down beside the plate. He added a piece of cornbread from a side dish. "For more if you need it," he said simply. The room went still. Eli rose to his full height, not towering but solid like a wall of stone. He reached for his worn hat, placed it on his head, and walked out the door without another word. Bootsteps clunked on the saloon floor, then faded into the brightness beyond. No one laughed now. The girl stood frozen for a second longer, unsure if this was a trick, a test, or a moment she had dreamed. When no one stopped her, she walked, slowly, eyes fixed on the plate, as if approaching holy ground. She sat. Her fingers shook as she picked up the strip of bacon and tore into it like a feral thing. But there was something strange. She did not gulp it down in desperation. She paused between bites, her jaw tight, her spine straightening, as if she would not give them the satisfaction of watching her beg. She picked up the piece of cornbread, broke it in 2, and as one half slipped from her fingers to the floor, she knelt without hesitation to retrieve it. Her knees hit the wood with a dull thud. No one moved. She brushed the crumbs gently, reverently, as if even dropped bread was not beneath her dignity, but something precious enough to keep. Then, lifting her chin, she bit into it. Her face remained unreadable, but her eyes, storm-dark and unwavering, spoke volumes. She did not cry. She did not thank the room. She ate like a girl who had been forgotten by the world, but not by herself. And when she was done, she tucked the silver coin into her dress, rose without a word, and walked out the same door Eli had passed through. The wind outside caught the edge of her tattered skirt and lifted it like a whisper. Inside the saloon, no one spoke for a long time. Not because they were moved, because something had shifted, and none of them could quite name it. The dirt road out of Bear Ridge twisted through sun-bleached hills and dry cottonwood shadows. Dust rose with every hoofbeat, then settled just as quietly. Eli rode alone, or so it seemed. Half a mile behind, June walked. Her feet were blistered, her legs aching, but she did not stop. She kept her distance, not daring to speak, not daring to believe. Yet something about the man, the way he had looked at her without pity, the way he had offered food and walked away, had unsettled everything she thought she knew about men. Up ahead, Eli never turned around, but he slowed his horse. Not a word passed between them, not even when the wind whistled loud enough to carry one. He just let the animal find its own pace, slow and steady, so that the sound of her footsteps might always follow. By the time the sun began to drop, painting the prairie in warm hues of orange and fire, they reached his land. It was not much to look at, just a small, weather-worn cabin at the edge of a fenced pasture. One corner of the roof sagged. The fence leaned like tired shoulders. The wind blew harder here, sharp and wide as the sky. June stood at the edge of the clearing, unsure if she was meant to stop. Eli dismounted, tied the reins to a cracked fence post, and walked to the front porch without looking back. The door creaked open. He stepped inside and left it open behind him. June waited. A minute passed. Then another. He stepped forward. The floorboards groaned under her bare feet. Inside, the house smelled of old wood, dust, and something faintly warm. Beans, maybe. There were no frills, no lace, no sign of a woman. Just a cast-iron stove, a table with a missing leg propped by a rock, and a single chair by the fireplace. Eli did not speak. He simply went about stoking the dying fire with practiced hands. She stood by the doorway, unsure whether she had been invited or simply not denied. Then Eli stood, walked past her without comment, and returned moments later with something in his hand. He set down an old wooden chair near the fire, adjusting it so it caught the warmth directly. Then, from a nearby shelf, he retrieved a stub of wax candle and placed it carefully on the windowsill beside the chair. He lit it with a match, then looked over at her, not with command, but with quiet offering. "It keeps the dark away," he said. Then he turned and walked out the door. She heard his boots fade, the creak of the porch again, then the distant rustle of hay as he entered the barn. Alone now, June stepped forward. The chair creaked under her light weight as she sat. The warmth from the hearth touched her skin like a memory. Her fingers hovered near the candle's flickering flame. No one had lit a candle for her before. Not since Mama. For years she'd been passed from hands to hands, barn to barn, always told to be grateful, always reminded of her place. Men who stared too long, women who looked away too fast. Hunger as a constant companion. She curled her legs to her chest, eyes watching the candle dance. In the stillness of the little room, she whispered, only to herself, only to the flame. Mama would have said, "That's kindness." And for the first time in years, she fell asleep without fear, cradled not by comfort, but by the absence of cruelty. The silence held her like a lullaby. The candle burned down slow and steady, and outside, under the Wyoming stars, Eli lay in the hay, arms crossed, eyes open, listening to the wind and the faint crackle of a fire he had built for someone else. The Wyoming morning came cold and brittle, despite the summer sun climbing over the hills. The wind had shifted, carrying with it a sharpness that made skin ache and fences groan. June awoke to the sound of cursing, low, clipped, and gritted. She rushed outside. Eli was halfway down the pasture fence, one arm clutching a post, the other hanging useless at his side. A section of rail lay broken at his feet. His shirt was torn at the elbow, and blood soaked the sleeve. His horse stood a few yards away, looking almost guilty. She approached cautiously. "What happened?" she asked. Eli glanced at her, then back at the fence. "Horse, spooked. Fence gave way. My hand caught between 'em both." He tried to lift it, his breath caught. The hand was already swelling, fingers bloated and red. He dropped it back to his side. "I can help," she said. He shook his head. Ain't much to do. But she was already moving. Inside the cabin, she searched the shelves until her fingers closed around a dusty book, Practical Medicine for Prairie Families. The spine cracked as she opened it. Her eyes scanned the yellowing pages, tracing diagrams of bones, ligaments, cloth wraps. She returned with a bowl of water, a torn undershirt, and trembling resolve. Eli sat at the table without protest, his injured hand resting on a clean cloth. June dipped the rag in warm water and began cleaning the blood. Her movements were awkward, her pressure uneven, but her hands did not stop. He winced, once. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He grunted. "Ain't your fault." She wrapped the cloth carefully, tightening it as she'd read. Then she tied the ends with a knot she'd learned from mending blankets. Silence settled again, but this time it held something fragile, intimate. She sat back, observing her work. It was sloppy but solid. "She'd want someone strong to use it," Eli said, glancing at the cloth. June blinked. "Who?" "My wife," he replied, voice low, eyes unreadable. It was her book. June looked down, then away. There was a long pause before she spoke again. "My mama had 9 of us. 9 mouths to feed. I was the last." Her voice wavered, but she forced it steady. "When the crops failed 3 years straight, she married off 4 sisters to men they barely knew. My 2 older brothers left to chase gold. The rest vanished with the hard times." Eli said nothing. She looked at her hands. "I was 14 when they left me on the steps of a church in Red Hollow. Said the pastor would take me in. He did, for a bit. But hunger makes kindness wear thin." Still, Eli said nothing. But when she turned to gather the used bandages, she noticed something new on the table. A folded square of cloth, delicate, soft, edges embroidered with faded thread, blue flowers curling around a stitched initial, C. She picked it up gently. Eli met her eyes. She used to keep that in her pocket. Said it was for when the wind got too strong for tears. June's lips parted, but no words came. She walked slowly back to her corner, the cloth in hand. Her heart twisted, grateful and aching at once. That night, she sat by the candlelight, the handkerchief pressed to her chest. She had not cried when her family left. She had not cried when Charles Voss came too close. She had not cried when she ran for days with nothing but a crust of bread. But seeing that cloth, it nearly broke her. And yet what stung more than memory was the silver ring that still clung to Eli's finger. She was not stupid. She knew what ghosts smelled like. She was not that woman. She was just someone who reminded him the world was still spinning. Still, when the wind howled through the cracks in the cabin wall, she held the handkerchief tighter. She would not be another name that passed through and vanished. She would earn this place. Even if it meant stitching 100 fences and learning every line of that medical book. Even if it meant proving, not pleading. That night, while Eli slept in the barn with his bad hand wrapped in her clumsy work, June tucked the handkerchief into her tattered dress pocket. It rested there like a vow. It was just before dawn when the gunshot cracked through the Wyoming silence. June bolted upright, the blanket tangled around her ankles. Her heart raced. She froze, listening. A second passed. Then 2. No more shots came. She threw on her shawl and stepped outside. The wind was sharp, the sky still dark blue. A sliver of gray on the horizon promised sunrise, but the cold clung like warning. From the barn came Eli's low voice, rough and tight. She ran. Behind the fence line, one of Eli's horses, his oldest mare, lay in the dirt, lifeless. A small pool of blood darkened the dry earth beneath her neck. Eli knelt beside the animal. His face was unreadable, jaw clenched hard. "She was gentle," he muttered. "Wouldn't spook for nothing." Then he saw it. Stuck just beneath the saddle strap, lodged deep in the wood of the fence, was a hunting knife. The handle was carved bone, weathered but distinct. A letter etched deep into the grip. Eli pulled it free, staring at the marking. His mouth tightened. That ain't no random killing. June stood back, arms crossed against the chill. She did not speak. That afternoon, while cleaning near the barn, June found something glinting in the grass. She bent down. A coin. He rubbed the dirt away with her thumb. It was silver, worn, but the engraving remained clear. Red Hollow Trading Post. Her breath caught. She looked up, heart pounding, then turned and walked inside. At the kitchen table, Eli was pouring coffee with his good hand. She dropped the coin beside his cup. He stared at it, then at her. "Someone looking for you?" he asked. June didn't answer immediately. Instead, she bent, slipped off her boot, and reached inside. From beneath the lining, she pulled a crumpled piece of parchment, creased, yellowed, and damp around the edges. She unfolded it. Eli took it carefully. His eyes scanned the words. A rough sketch. Her face. A reward. It was not an official bounty. No seal. No lawman's signature. Just private vengeance, dressed as justice. His voice dropped to gravel. "Charles Voss." June nodded. "I worked in his house, cleaning, feeding chickens, keeping quiet. He started cornering me, touching when no one looked. I tried to tell his wife. She turned away." Her voice did not shake. It was flat, hardened. "All night I ran, took nothing but bread. 2 days later, his wife took fever, died. They said I cursed her. Called me a witch." Eli looked down at the paper again. "And now he wants you gone." "Gone and forgotten," she said. Her hands were fists on the table, her eyes glassy but dry. Eli reached for the coin again, held it between 2 fingers. "He doesn't forget." The wind howled outside. A hawk cried far above the barn roof. Eli stood, reached for his hat, and walked toward the stable. "Come on," he said. She followed. He led her to the brown colt, not yet broken but calm under his touch. He saddled the animal with practiced ease, adjusting the straps with one hand. "Climb up," he said. June stared. "I don't know how, but now's the time." She hesitated, then grabbed the saddle horn and swung her leg over. Wobbly. Awkward. Eli held the reins, guided the horse in a slow circle. "Keep your back straight. He'll feel your fear faster than you will." She nodded, focused. Eli stepped beside her, placed his hand on hers, steadying. She looked down at him. Something passed between them in that brief touch. Not longing, not comfort, just recognition. He handed her the reins. "Go ahead." The horse stepped forward, nervous. She guided it around once, twice. The third time, she smiled. Not wide, not for show. Just a flicker of light where none had been. From the fence, Eli watched. The sun broke through the clouds then, casting the whole field in gold. Her hair caught the light. Her spine straightened. She turned the horse toward him and said, a little breathless, "I didn't fall." "No," he said. "You didn't." He didn't smile, but his eyes did. And as she rode, turning again into the wind, her laughter, quiet and rough, drifted back to him across the prairie. It sounded like something he thought he'd forgotten. Hope. The fire crackled low, fed with dry wood that snapped and hissed as it burned. Outside, the wind had died down, leaving only the creak of old wood and the distant call of a night bird. Inside the cabin, June stirred the pot gently. Her hands were steady now, her movements familiar. She had peeled the potatoes by the window earlier that afternoon, humming under her breath. The broth was thin, the salt uneven, but it was warm, real, made with her hands. She set 2 bowls on the table. Eli sat with his usual quiet, watching the flames more than the food. When she placed the bowl in front of him, he glanced up, nodded once, and picked up his spoon. She sat across from him, fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve as he took the first bite. The silence stretched. Then he spoke, low and dry. "It's better than jerky." Her face flushed. She ducked her head, but a smile pulled at her lips. "I forgot the time," she said. "And maybe added too much salt?" Eli shrugged, spooning more. Still better. They ate without rush, without conversation, but not without connection. The kind that doesn't need filling with words. Afterward, she cleared the bowls and wiped the table clean with a cloth, moving slower than she needed to. She felt him watching her, though his eyes rarely moved. Then, as she reached for the pot to scrub, he spoke again. "What's your name?" She froze. The question hung there, simple, but immense. She turned slowly, her hands damp and warm. "June," she said, barely more than a breath. "June Carter." He nodded once. "I'm Eli." She already knew, but hearing it from his lips made it real. Mutual. She looked at him, truly looked. His worn flannel, the fading scar at his temple, the bandage she had wrapped days ago, still firm on his hand. Eli stood, walked to the narrow bookshelf near the hearth, and pulled something from the second shelf. A book, its leather spine faded, the gold lettering nearly rubbed away. He handed it to her. She turned it over in her hands. Whispers of the Plains, a collection of poems. Inside the cover was a name, written in elegant script. Catherine Ward. She loved this, Eli said, settling back into his chair. "Maybe you will too." June clutched the book carefully, as if it might crumble from memory alone. "I don't read too fast," she said. "Ain't a race," he replied. She opened to a random page, cleared her throat, and began. Her voice stumbled at first, catching on unfamiliar phrasing, but as she read on, something loosened in her shoulders. The words were soft and sorrowful, lines about wind across tall grass, about missing someone without knowing their face. She read through one full poem, then another. Eli didn't move. His eyes stayed on the fire, but his face was softer now, his hand resting on the table, palm up. When June reached the end of a stanza, she looked up. That was her favorite, he said, quiet as dusk. She closed the book gently, her fingers tracing the edge of the page. "It's beautiful." "She thought words could outlast dying," he murmured. "I never believed that, until now." She blinked, then smiled. Not the kind born of politeness, but something fuller, warmer. For the first time, the little cabin did not feel borrowed. It felt inhabited, not haunted by what was lost, but nurtured by what might grow. Outside, the wind shifted again, carrying the scent of sage and soil. The prairie was listening. Inside, for the first time in years, the house had a voice. And it sounded like poetry. The fire had burned low, sending soft light flickering across the log walls of the cabin. Outside, the night had turned colder, and the wind had taken on the sharp edge of Wyoming's high country. June had just finished folding laundry by the hearth when she heard boots crunching over gravel. She peeked through the window. A horse, a badge glinting under the moonlight. Sheriff Thomas Langley. Her heart stilled. She backed away from the window, but Eli was already at the door, pulling it open before the sheriff could knock. The older man tipped his hat. "Evenin', Eli. Sorry to drop by uninvited." Eli leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Late for a social call?" Langley looked past him into the dim interior. "Heard there's been talk about a girl. Young, alone, maybe passed through town. Saw someone matching that description not far from your land." Eli's face didn't change. "Just me here," he said, "and the old gelding." Langley narrowed his eyes. "No sign of a stranger?" "No. She wouldn't be trouble, you understand, just wanted for questions. Rumors get loud around here." Eli shrugged. "Rumors are just wind, Tom." The sheriff studied him for a beat, then sighed. "Well, I know you keep to yourself. Just had to check." Eli nodded once. "Appreciate the courtesy." Langley tipped his hat again. "You ever do see someone, let me know." "I will." The sheriff turned, mounted, and disappeared into the dark. Behind the barn, June had pressed herself between bales of hay, her breath shallow, arms trembling from the cold. She had heard it all. Every word. He had lied. For her. She waited until the hoofbeats faded completely, then stepped out. Her eyes scanned the yard. The house was still. The fire inside still burned faintly through the windows. She walked softly around the back, climbed the porch stairs without a sound. Inside, Eli sat by the fire, silent, his jaw working as if chewing an old thought. She didn't go in. Instead, she slipped around to the side table just outside the door, pulled a piece of paper from the ledger, and began to write. Her handwriting was rough, uneven, but legible. "Thank you. You didn't have to do that. I won't bring more trouble to your door. I'm sorry. You deserve quiet. You deserve peace. I won't stay where I'm not safe to be seen. You've given more than anyone. That's enough. Jay." She folded the note, placed it beneath the candle stub, and set the embroidered handkerchief, Catherine's, beside it. Then she slipped down the steps, her shawl pulled tight, her shoes already soaked with dew. She didn't get far. Halfway down the dirt path toward the gate, Ellie's voice cut through the dark behind her. "Where the hell do you think you're going?" She froze. He was standing on the porch, shirt open at the throat, his boots unlaced. His face wasn't angry. It was scared. "I heard everything," she said, her voice cracking. "You lied for me? You could be fined." "Worse." He took a step toward her. "I've been fined for worse." She shook her head. "I won't be the reason they come for you." "Then why the note?" he asked. "Why leave without a word?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Because I'm not worth this." He walked to her, slow, deliberate, until they stood face to face in the middle of the yard, their breath fogging the night air. He reached for her hand. She flinched, just once, then let him take it. His grip was firm, steady. "You're worth everything," he said. June's lip trembled. She blinked up at him, the stars overhead blurring in her eyes. "Don't lie again," she whispered. "I ain't," he said. "You've seen how quiet this place gets. Too quiet. I forgot what it felt like to hear someone else breathe, to have a voice reading poems, a bowl of soup waiting, a damn reason to light the candle every night." Her throat closed. She tried to speak, but the words stayed trapped. "So," she nodded. "Just once." And let him lead her back to the house. The piano sat beneath a canvas tarp in the corner of the cabin, long forgotten, half buried in dust and time. Its legs were nicked, the ivory keys yellowed and uneven. But something about it called to June. One morning, while Eli was out tending cattle, she pulled back the tarp. Dust plumed in the air. She coughed, then smiled. It was a thing of beauty, even in its ruin. She fetched a rag, a bucket of water, and began to clean. She polished every key, every curve of the wooden frame. On the front panel, just above the keys, she carved a single rose, delicate, curling into the softened grain. It took her an hour, maybe two. Time moved differently when her hands had purpose. Later, in the back of the bookshelf, she found a journal, a small leather-bound book worn at the edges. Inside, sheet music, notes, marginalia in careful, elegant script. Catherine's Wedding Waltz, written for Eli, June 1877. Her fingers traced the faded lines. That evening she sat at the piano, tried one note, then another. Off-key, brittle, but the tune was still there. She began teaching herself from the journal, practicing each bar slowly, sounding out the melody. Days passed. She fumbled, started over. Played by lantern light long after Eli had gone to bed. Then, one Sunday afternoon, with the wind soft against the eaves and the grass outside glistening under sunset gold, she played the song in full. Eli was on the porch, sharpening a blade. The music drifted out to him, hesitant at first, then stronger. He stopped. The knife slipped from his hand and thudded to the floorboards. He did not move. His boots stayed planted, his hands clenched by his sides. The melody floated, gentle and sweet, with just enough ache to sound like a memory. He didn't step inside, but his eyes shimmered. When the last note faded, she closed the journal, placed it atop the piano, and looked toward the door. He still didn't enter. She stood, walked to the doorway. They stared at each other for a long moment. "I found her journal," June said softly. Eli nodded once. "She played that every spring," he said, "until her belly got too big to reach the keys. She wanted to teach our child someday." June stepped closer. "What happened?" she asked. He looked down at his hands. "Catherine went into labor early. No doctor for 50 miles. I rode hard, but the storm came. The trail washed out. When I got back," his voice cracked, "she was gone. So was the baby." He didn't need to say more. June's eyes filled, not just with sorrow for him, but for every night he had sat alone in silence, for every year that piano had stayed untouched. She reached behind her and picked up the journal. "She'd want me to read it," she said. Eli looked at her then, really looked, and whatever haunted him seemed to ease, just slightly. He stepped inside, walked to the piano, took off his hat. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached for his left hand. The silver ring there had dulled with age. He slid it off, set it on the piano's top beside the journal. And then, as the wind rustled the cabin walls and the late sun cast shadows like lace across the floor, he reached out and took June's hand. His grip was warm, solid. "You're my now," he said. And for once, neither of them had to look back. Spring came to Bear Ridge like a long-awaited promise. Snow melted into wildflowers, and the town square bloomed with music, pies, and the scent of fresh earth. June clung to Eli's arm as they arrived. She wore a blue dress that once belonged to his late wife, now altered with care. Her braid trailed down her back, loose strands kissed by wind. Eli, in his cleanest shirt and polished boots, walked with quiet authority. As they stepped from the wagon, Eli took her hand. Openly, the square stilled. Eyes turned, some curious, others critical. But no one dared approach Eli Ward. They moved slowly through the crowd. June kept her chin lifted, though her fingers trembled. Eli gave her hand one firm squeeze. Then a voice cut through the music. "Well, I'll be damned." Charles Voss stepped into the square, flanked by 2 gunmen. He held a crumpled parchment like a badge of power. "I've come for the girl," he barked. "June Carter. Runaway, thief, witch, some say. She was mine, and she ran, taking secrets and silver." Gasps, murmurs. "She's mine," Voss repeated, "and I'll drag her back, law or no law." June froze. Her breath hitched, but she did not flee. She stepped behind Eli. Voss sneered. "Hiding behind him forever?" Eli stepped forward. "She's not hiding. She's with me." "Fool," Voss snapped. "She'll ruin your name." "She is my name now," Eli replied. "She's my family." "Family? She's a criminal." "I'm not protecting a criminal. I'm protecting what's right." The crowd stirred. "He stole my land," someone shouted. "He cheated my boy," another added. "He blamed her for his wife's fever," an old woman said. Then came the sheriff, boots thudding as he approached. Sheriff Langley stopped beside Eli, eyes steady on Voss. "You're not welcome here," he said. "I've got rights. You've got 3 assault charges in Red Hollow, and a ranch hand who says you paid him to kill Eli's horse." The crowd tensed. Voss's hand twitched toward his coat. "Don't," said a clear voice. Jacob, the young sharpshooter Eli had trained, stood rifle raised, eyes steady. "Drop it, Voss." The square fell silent. Voss looked around, at the townsfolk, at Eli, at the barrel of Jacob's rifle. He dropped the paper, bent his gun. Langley nodded. Deputies seized him. Cheers rose as Voss was led away. June stood still, tears glistening. Eli turned, lifted her hand. She found her voice. "I'm June Ward now." Cheers again. An old woman stepped forward, placed a crown of wildflowers on her head. You belong. That night, stars stretched wide over the prairie. On the porch of their cabin, June and Eli carved a small star into a wooden cradle he'd built. Inside, the fire danced. June played Catherine's waltz on the piano, flawlessly, her fingers calm, her soul steady. Eli stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder, the other at her waist. As the music faded, June leaned into him and whispered, "You gave me leftovers, but you're the gift I never dreamed of." The wind rustled the grass. The old horse shifted quietly. And on the table by the window, a wooden box lay open. Inside, 2 new rings gleamed, carved not just with names, but with survival. Eli and June home found. From a scrap of bread to a lifetime of love. In the Wild West, even broken souls can build something whole. If this story touched you, subscribe to Wild West Love Stories for more tales where love defies the odds and hearts find home where no one thought they could. Where bullets missed, but hearts didn't.